Okay, so I think that's maybe it for the moment. Obviously, there might be people that join later on, but I think we'll get started. So I'm just going to press the record button because this webinar is going to be recorded. Just bear with me. Recording. Yes. Okay. So thank you for attending this webinar. It's one of a series that we've been holding as part of the engagement on the City Plan 2041 Key Issues stage. And this webinar is for consultants, planning agents and developers, key users of the City Plan. My name is Helen Gregory. I work in the planning policy team, and I'll be running through the first few slides of this presentation. And then I'll hand over to Steve Tremlett, who's our interim planning policy manager. Go to the housekeeping slide. So you'll see, as I said, we're recording this webinar and we'll post it on the council's YouTube channel. And there's going to be a link to the channel in the chat, and you can see the recordings from earlier webinars. Of course, we'll make sure that any personal information is redacted before the recording is uploaded. And as you'll see, we've switched off the microphones and cameras during the webinar. So please do use the Q&A function to ask any questions. So if you could use that rather than the chat channel. Please feel free to like other people's questions if you want, and add questions to the Q&A as we go along. And we'll try and answer those questions at the end of the presentation. If we can't answer all the questions today, we'll try and answer some common themes. If you have any technical questions, for instance, if you can't hear the presentation, do also post that in the Q&A, and we'll try and assist you as we go along. But just to emphasise, we do need you to respond formally through the Council's consultation portal, Your Voice, and we'll put a link to this in the chat. So, you know, we'll answer your questions as best we can today, but if you want to still put that question forward as part of your consultation response, please do. And please finally be mindful of what you put in the Q&A and use appropriate language. Okay, so the City Plan. As I'm sure many of you are aware of, it's a statutory document that we do need to prepare, and it forms part of the development plan for the city and has to be prepared following legal process and the tests of soundness, and it provides a framework of planning policies to guide future development in the city. And as it's related to land use planning, development and change in the city, it obviously is a key document to help support the council's plan, as well as other citywide strategies such as the housing strategy, the local transport plan, the economic plan, etc. So it's an important delivery tool for the council. In terms of what's in the city plan, well, it is a key way for setting out our approach to our housing and commercial space requirements over the plan period. It also contains strategic citywide policies that help support high quality and well-designed places and improvement in the public realm. Obviously, important for the city, the conservation and enhancement of the city's built environment, our important heritage assets, but also our natural environment and green infrastructure. We obviously need to make sure that new development is sustainable and is supported by the necessary infrastructure. And in terms of what it covers the whole of the administrative area of the city, apart from those parts that fall within the South Downs National Park, and that's got its own South Downs local plan. So in terms of the current city plan, we have, well, as many of you will be familiar with, we've got the City Plan Part 1, which was adopted in 2016. It sets out the strategic citywide policies and strategic site allocations, such as Preston Barracks, the Brighton Centre, Churchill Square area. And this plan needs to be updated to ensure that it reflects the changed circumstances since 2016, new national planning policy framework, and obviously council priorities set out in the new council plan. We've also got the City Plan Part 2, which was recently adopted in 2022, That sets out the detailed development management policies and further site allocations. We consider it to be up to date, and it's not part of the review unless there are changes to national policy or local priorities. So we're at the first early stage, if you like, in producing the City Plan 2041. So if you've had a chance to look at the key issues document that we've published as part of this consultation, we've set out the issues that we think the new city plan should address, some of the options for addressing them. And part of this early engagement is to ask, are there any other issues you think we need to consider? Just to emphasise again, as you'll see from the document, we've not drafted policies yet. There are no site allocations identified in the key issues document. We're at that sort of shaping stage. And there is further consultation to come. For example, we are working with the planning agent forum locally to set up a workshop for Wednesday, the 13th of December. And we hope to have our lead councillor, Councillor Jacob Taylor, with us there, and that will allow for a bit of a deep dive discussion. So the key issues document is arranged in a series of themes, and Steve's going to take you through some of the key issues around those themes. And there's also, just to make people aware, if you're not already, that there is a call for sites going on alongside this consultation. So I'll pass you over to Steve.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you to everyone for joining the webinar. I can see a few familiar names in the attendance list, so welcome to all. So the previous slide shows the key themes. I'm just going to sort of give a little bit more detail on those themes. So we've got limited time, we can't go into deep dive on all of them, but I'm going to give a sort of so firstly, the spatial strategy is obviously key to the plan. Where should development go, essentially? We will need to review our current spatial strategy. Currently, in the existing city plan, that has a focus very much on brownfield sites by necessity, mixed-use development. We encourage high densities. There are 8 development areas set out in the plan, which are areas of the city where major development opportunities were identified, regeneration opportunities. They're largely along major transport routes. We also have some development sites on the urban fringe, which is the area between the existing built-up area and the South Downs National Park boundary. And there are a number of cross-cutting special area policies which give a coordinated policy approach to certain areas of the city where there are lots of competing priorities, competing land uses, such as central Brighton and the seafront. So for the new plan, looking forward to 2041, what we think we need to do, we will look at the existing development areas to see if there are any further opportunities for significant development in them. Many of the big sites in those areas, Hove Station, Preston Barracks, and so on, they've been built out. So we'll need to consider whether that approach of identifying those areas is still appropriate for the new plan. Equally, are there other areas of the city which could be suitable for significant new development? We'd also look at the potential for more homes in lower density suburbs through gentle densification. As part of all of this, we'll need to consider the impact on the transport network, not just in the city, but also the key junctions along the A27, which was an important issue in the examination of City Plan Part 2. So this slide just illustrates where the existing development areas are. You may well be familiar with this. In purple, those are the development areas. In green is the South Downs National Park. So that shows just how tightly that is drawn around the city and how limited our opportunities are to physically expand the built-up area. The sky blue bits are the urban fringe. So City Plan Part 2 does identify a number of development sites there, quite a few of which have been built out. The largest of those is sort of in purple to the northwest of the city, which is Toad's Hole Valley. Much the big bit of sky blue to the east is Brighton Racecourse and areas around there. so on. So that is just to give a bit of a visual illustration of the current spatial strategy and also the constraints we face for sites for new development. So how many new homes to plan for? We'll need to set a new housing target. The current city plan target is 660 dwellings per annum, so 13,200 over the 20-year plan period. And that was based on an assessment in 2015 of need, which showed a need of 1,500 dwellings per annum. And we are planning to meet 44% of that need in the current plan. And that was considered to be an appropriate target in the examination of that plan due to the constraints and the limited capacity of the city to accommodate new development. So looking forward, the current government standard method, which includes the 35% uplift for the 20 biggest urban areas, of which we are number 20, gives a figure, a much greater figure of about 2,300, and the proposed revisions to the standard method, which we expect to see in the new MPPF before Christmas, increases that slightly further. So that's a significant, very significant housing need figure. We'll need to test to what extent we can meet that need. Clearly, it's highly unlikely we'll be able to meet it in full. In our most recently published SLAR, that has enough sites identified that could provide roughly 670 dwellings per annum. So that's sort of in line with the current city plan target, but we will be working hard to consider if our housing sites could have more potential for development, potential of the council's own house building programme, where we can optimise densities further, and of course looking to our neighbours through the duty to cooperate. And as such, we're very keen to have any sites put forward through the call for sites to assist us in this. This I thought it'd be useful just to put in a bit of information as to what's actually happened on the ground to give some context to that target. So we had a target for 660 over the current plan period. This graph shows what we've actually completed, what's been delivered since the plan period started in 2010. Generally less than that, the average is 562. That's been bumped up significantly by the last 3 years, which have been the 3 years of highest delivery, helped in particular by some large sites coming forward, such as Preston Barracks, Hove Station, and so on. But even those are about just over 1,000, well short of the our standard method requirement of over 2,000. And again, that's the Hove Station area, just to give an example of the some of the high density development that we've seen on our larger sites. So delve a bit deeper into the housing issue, affordable housing. Now, as well as setting a housing target, we need to ensure we provide the right mix, the right type of homes and affordable housing to address the severe affordability crisis in the city. Access to decent quality and affordable housing is fundamental. It's key to people's well-being. And the high house prices in the city for buying and for renting, we know is a significant need for affordable housing. The greatest need is for affordable houses for rent. There's also demand for affordable home ownership, but because of the high market values of homes, that means that even when they're classified as affordable, they're still affordable for many households. They're not genuinely affordable. So as part of this, we'll need to consider our priorities for different types of affordable housing. Should we be seeking greater amounts of affordable housing for rent? We think that should be the priority. And how much that should we seek at social rents? So the greater discount required for those may impact the targets. We intend to continue securing affordable housing from smaller sites of 5 to 10 units because they make up a big part of our housing supply and we don't have too many larger sites. Should we have an increased role for commuted payments given the problems that there have been with registered providers bringing forward and taking on Section 106 sites? It's an issue we're considering. And we also have a affordable housing viability assessment, which is currently underway and is looking at viability of affordable housing for various typologies of development in the city. Housing mix, another issue which the plan will update. This table here is taken from our SHMA, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, which is published on the website, and that suggests what the consultants there felt would be an appropriate mix of market housing, affordable home ownership and affordable rented in the city. So we will be considering that and taking forward a new policy. We think development sites normally provide a mix of housing sizes. And one of the questions we ask in the consultation is, should we set a minimum percentage of family homes on suitable sites because of difficulties we have in providing larger sites due to constrained brownfield development land in the city, which is more suited towards flatted development. We do that, take that approach currently for our urban fringe sites in Part 2 plan. So other housing issues, we need to ensure that the housing needs of different groups are met. Students, there's 2 universities in the city, student numbers are expected to rise. But the pipeline purpose-built student accommodation we have coming forward should be sufficient to accommodate the increased demand from that expected rise. But of course, providing further student accommodation could reduce the pressure on the private rented sector. It could possibly free up some family homes currently used as HMOs for family housing. We'll also be considering whether new PBSA developments should be required to provide accommodation suitable for students with families. That's a question we ask in the consultation. We will also be looking at specialist housing to meet demand from older people and those disabilities. There's a 50% rise expected of those aged 65 plus over the plan period. Pitches for gypsies, travellers and travelling show people. We are currently finalising a study looking at the need for additional pitches for that part of the community, and that shows that we have a small need of under 10, but a need nonetheless. Co-living and build to rent, 33% of housing in the city is privately rented, increasing demand for privately rented accommodation, and we're seeing increasing numbers of build to rent developments and sort of more recently co-living developments, although none of those have actually been delivered so far. We think this type of development increases choice at the strategic level. We think it's important that it does include a mix of housing types on sites and that it contributes towards the city's housing needs. We don't currently have a policy on co-living in existing city plans. So that's something we are looking to develop. We've published interim planning guidance, and the policy could be based on this guidance, but we will be interested to hear people's views on co-living. So moving away from housing, economy, office space, we published an employment land study that's available on our website, which looks at the supply and demand for employment space in the city. Highlights from that study, that it shows there's a moderate demand for high quality office space. Found that existing pipeline supply could be sufficient. That is undelivered allocations in the current city plan and those sites with planning permission. That is quite a big leap to say that all those unprovided allocations are going to come forward. Obviously, they've been allocated for some time now and they haven't yet, so that's somewhat unknown. There's a bit of a two-tier office market in the city. Old offices have higher vacancy rates and they comprise a significant proportion of the offices in the city. 45% were constructed or renovated before 1950, and they are likely to be less attractive to businesses. They may soon be unlettable, indeed, if they do not meet new energy efficiency standards. So as a result, improving the environmental performance of existing offices is important. We're considering strengthening the policy safeguarding office accommodation to ensure that refurbishing older space has been appropriately considered before changes of use can be accepted. Industrial space, the study found there was a significant demand and very little available space on the city's existing industrial estates. Additional allocations would be required, and we also need to safeguard and protect existing designated industrial sites, in particular by resisting pressures that we do see to redevelop those for mixed use or full residential on those sites. We need to encourage them to be refurbished, retrofitted, seek opportunities where possible to increase the amount of industrial floor space on those existing sites, given the difficulty of providing new industrial sites in the city. Permitted development rights have also affected how well we can protect those workspaces across the city. We need to consider how better we can protect the loss of smaller, flexible, affordable workspaces which support the significant creative industries sector in the city. And that's again a question in the consultation. We'd be very interested in your views on how we can protect that space and indeed provide more newer, affordable space to support that sector. Moving on to sustainability and climate change, we also need to ensure new development of public spaces, cities' infrastructure, and natural environment is all resilient to climate change, for example, overheating, flood risks, and so on. Council this week published its decarbonisation pathways study, and also the net zero commitment the Council's made will also inform the city plan review. So we'll need to consider, for example, how best to support the delivery of low and zero carbon energy. So that could include solar power, district heating systems, whether there's a need to identify suitable locations for renewable energy projects and infrastructure to support that, how we can encourage new buildings to be designed to reduce the use of new primary material, maximise the use of recycled material, and that they should be designed to be reused if the initial purpose of the initial function ceases to be. We want new buildings to minimise energy use and carbon emissions, and we are considering whether we should set our own local standards on this that go beyond the government's future home standard. That's something else we are very keen to hear your views on, and we'll be commissioning evidence looking at the options for that in the new year. And we are also considering whether we should have tighter targets on water efficiency development as well. So moving on to biodiversity and natural environment, green infrastructure. Biodiversity is under increasing pressure. We're considering how new development can provide opportunities for additional biodiversity and more greening. We are considering whether we should set a higher BNG target that's more ambitious than the legally required 10%. That's a question we ask in the consultation. Also, where off-site BNG provision could be located, how we could improve the natural environment by requiring more green infrastructure. We've published a green infrastructure study that's also available on the website. That shows us there are areas of the city that lack green infrastructure. We're therefore considering whether we should take a more proactive approach to providing more through an urban greening factor policies. It's been introduced elsewhere, and what that would do is set a target for the amount of green infrastructure that should be provided by a new development. Moving on to design and placemaking, the new plan will also address how good design can help create high quality places, high quality public realm and buildings, of course. We intend to bring forward an overarching urban design policy that would explore how to make the best use of land available. And as part of this, we'd also be looking at options for increasing density of new development, of course, in the context of the housing need, which I went over earlier. So that will include looking at locations for more mid-rise developments, perhaps in some in the suburban areas. We currently, in the existing city plan, have areas which are more suitable for tall buildings, and they're counted as those over 6 stories. And some people might not consider 6 stories or 18 metres to be particularly tall, and we have seen some significantly taller buildings come forward on some sites. So should we have an additional category of very tall buildings that could perhaps be over 12 stories, and if so, should we identify suitable areas and or particular sites where those much taller buildings would be acceptable? And we will also be considering our options for further design codes. We are producing a city centre design code at the moment, and we'll be considering whether there are other areas of the city that would be suitable for a design code. On to culture in tourism. Of course, we will inevitably continue to be a very popular destination for tourists, both day trippers and those that stay overnight. We need to ensure there are enough places for visitors to stay, both now and in the future, taking on projected demand for tourism. So that includes how to protect hotels, whether our existing hotel core zone, where we protect those hotels, whether that is still appropriate or should it be adjusted. We will need to consider short-term lets and the effect that those have on the housing supply, obviously taking into account the limited powers we have at the moment to do so through planning, but the government is looking at that, and that's something that we hope to see some government measures come forward as this plan is prepared. On the cultural side, we will continue to protect our cultural and leisure venues and spaces. We will encourage events and activities in different parts of the city. We want to make sure the city remains attractive to artists and creative industries, creative entrepreneurs. And the nighttime economy is something that Brighton is very well known for as well. We want to support that better. We want to be more explicit about the agent of change, and we're likely to bring forward a specific nighttime economy policy that aims to balance the needs of businesses and residents. Also, in this section of the consultation, we cover retail in our local centres. We'll be looking at the hierarchy of those, and we'll be commissioning evidence as well to look at the demand for retail going forward over the plan period. Okay, nearing the end now. So transport and infrastructure. Our detailed policies on transport are in City Plan Part 2, so we are unlikely to significantly change those. We will have a new strategic policy which supports the local transport plan, a new one which is currently in production, and sets our overall approach to sustainable transport. There are some particular issues which we will be addressing through the new city plan. One of those is park and ride. It's a priority for this administration to try and find a park and ride site. If one is identified within the city's city plan area, we will support that. And we'll also be looking at our parking standards. These are set out how much parking should be provided in different types of new development in different locations. That is in City Plan Part 2, but it's based on an SPD which was adopted nearly 10 years ago now. So it's time to review those, and we ask a question in the consultation about that and what terms of new parking standards should take into account. Infrastructure, of course, is needed to support new development, and we're also asking infrastructure providers if there are any new infrastructure requirements we should be aware of drawing up this plan. So last but one slide, healthy city and communities is the final theme. So planning and design can, of course, encourage healthy lifestyles. It can ensure access to open space and sports facilities, provide opportunities for food growing, and also support the local food system. What we want to do is find out through the consultation what else we could do to encourage healthy lifestyles through planning, how we can further support access to healthy food, so on. We could strengthen our policy requirements for food growing and new developments. That's something that we ask in the consultation. We will also continue to protect and encourage better use of the city's open space, its sports facilities, and we are considering under what limited circumstances we would allow loss of open space. And with new development, we're considering whether we need to prioritise what type of open space should be provided on site and where that is possible. So finally, just to sum up how to comment, we've set out questions throughout the consultation just to guide people's thoughts and help you tell us what you think. We want to hear your views on the issues that interest you most. You don't have to comment on everything. You can just pick and choose the issues you're interested in. We would strongly encourage you to use our online consultation portal. It will help you make your responses, and also it makes life much easier for us in terms of analysing them and processing those responses. And we are trying to bring this plan forward quickly, and that would help us do so. We will, of course, accept responses provided by email as well. If you do put in large PDFs, we may ask you to provide a succinct summary of those as well, just to ensure that your key points aren't missed when we have to summarise them. And the consultation is open until the 20th of January. It can be accessed at that website and also through that QR code there. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll now try to answer any questions there may be.
Okay, so please do use the Q&A function to put your questions if you want. Just checking if you've got any questions to answer. I can't see any at the moment. A little bit longer. Queries. about the process, the timetable, or anything that you've heard today? Okay, so we've just had a question in. Who's undertaking the viability assessment for the council?
The affordable housing viability assessment is being undertaken by Dixon Cell Partnership. We will need to do a whole plan viability assessment next year once we are clear about what policies we want to bring forward, but that has not been commissioned yet.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions on the presentation or process and timetable? We've just got a question here. Which areas would you think are suitable for very tall buildings?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's something which we are keen to hear people's views on. We have seen very tall buildings come forward in quite a variety of areas across the city in recent years. Preston Barracks and the Anston House site, for example. So that they are quite well spread relatively across the city. Of course, there are some in the centre of Sussex Heights, which have been there for some time. But it's genuinely a question that we are in listing mode on. We're aware that there are a lot of listed buildings or the conservation areas in the city as well, which may constrain the amount of height you can get in some spots. But we would genuinely be interested in people's views on that.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Just give a few moments just in case people are mulling over or typing their question in the Q&A function. Okay, well, it doesn't look as if there are any more questions coming forward. Just double check.
We've got one in the chat.
Oh.
It's on energy and carbon. You, Helen.
All right, I'll just read it out so other people. Are there any considerations to address energy and carbon with the urgency that is required in the reality of climate change, and perhaps using as a basis other successful local plans such as the London Plan, as well as the very important work of organisations like the UK Green Building Council? For example, can we move to requiring operational energy assessments and whole life carbon assessments to demonstrate compliance with targets set out in terms of energy use intensity, rather than simply a Part L compliance? Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, those are the issues that we have set out in that theme of the key issues document. We've seen what local plan in the London Plan has done, and some of the other plans around the country like Cornwall and Bath and North East Somerset and Warwick. So we're aware that there are best practice that have managed to get through the system and been found sound at examination. We're obviously aware of the 2023 written ministerial statement, which may limit our opportunity. We'd obviously, whatever policy approach locally that we want to take, we want to have the evidence that supports that it will have no impact on the deliverability of housing or viability. So as Steve mentioned, we will look at that as part of evidence gathering next year. But yes, we are well aware of the different types of local standard which looks at energy use intensity as a way forward. And also, just to say that when the council builds its new homes or the new homes programme, we are looking at those sorts of targets. So there's some local sort of examples that we can draw on in terms of best practice there as well. I'm looking back in the Q&A chat just to see just now. Are there any considerations?
Same question.
It's the same question. Okay, lovely. Well, hopefully I've answered that question sufficiently. Any more questions in the Q&A chat, please? Okay, so unless there are any other queries or questions, then we will say thank you very much.
One more.
Excellent. Sorry, giving people time to type in. Why is there a need to further strengthen or safeguard employment floor space, existing policies already state that conversion should not be allowed unless it's been demonstrated to be unfeasible. There doesn't seem to be a need to further strengthen it. Okay, I think the point that we are concerned about is, as Steve pointed out, we've got a large proportion of our office space which is of poor quality, that doesn't meet the needs of people looking for space. They want higher energy efficiencies, they want modern facilities, and so we also know that some of them are poor in terms of energy efficiency. So I think what we're looking there is how can we encourage those secondary office sites, premises to be refurbished, to be reused, partly from the sort of circular economy argument, but also because of the role that the office space within the central Brighton, within some of our district and local centres play in terms of our sub-regional role as an office location. So we want to make sure that we can support the economy to grow, and job growth will be in the office sector over the plan period to ensure there's a sufficient range and type of office spaces to meet that demand. Any further questions? I don't see any more questions coming in. So again, I'll ask if there aren't any further questions and queries. I just want to thank everybody for attending our webinar today. As I said, this has been recorded and we'll make it available on the council's YouTube site shortly. So you'll be able to look at that alongside the other webinars we've held. And consultation is open until the 20th of January. So we do want to hear your views and thoughts about issues we've identified, and whether you think we've missed any issues or thoughts about how we might address them. And thank you again for attending this webinar.